Leading me on my Merthyr voyage of discovery is author, journalist and travel writer Rebecca Lees. Originally from Swansea and now living near Pontypridd, Becky's been a mad keen walker for as long as she can remember. And she combines her love of walking and history in her guidebooks for walkers. Hi Rebecca.
Hi Derek, how are you?
I'm all right.
nice to meet you.
And you. Well, this used to be a grand family home.
Yeah, that's right.
What on earth are these cannons doing here then?
Well, the cannons were central to the war effort, really, at the height of the Napoleonic Wars, because the Crauchetes, who owned Cyfarthfa Castle and the ironworks, were responsible for making them. And Merthyr was so central to the war effort that Lord Nelson actually visited Merthyr in 1802 with Lady Hamilton.
So a lot of history here.
Lots of history going on, yes.
Merthyr sits on the southern edge of the Brecon Beacons National Park. Our route takes us from the grounds of Cyfarthfa Castle down and over the River Taff, then a short detour to the site of the old ironworks, before heading out of town along the Taff Trail to call in at Vaynard Church, and then climbing steeply up to the hilltop site of Morlais Castle. It's then downhill all the way along the banks of the Taff Fechan back to the start, having walked 7.5 surprising miles. Nice little footbridge here, Rebecca.
Well, it's actually more than a footbridge. It's actually the oldest surviving cast iron railway bridge in the world. It's called Pont y Cafnau, which means Bridge of the Troughs. And there would have been a huge aqueduct running along the top here, and that would have carried water into the ironworks and powered a massive wheel.
And this tramway here would have taken limestone to the ironworks directly?
Yeah, that's right, from the Gurnos quarry.
It's hard to believe, isn't it, that this is the oldest cast iron bridge in the world.
Yeah.
And it's right here in Merthyr Tydfil.
That's right, quite tucked out of the way, isn't it?
Next to the industrial estate.
That's right.
A brief detour downstream leads to a once impressive industrial landmark, which contributed to the transformation of Merthyr from a small farming village to the largest town in Wales. You could walk or cycle past this piece of waste ground and not realise that it's a really significant historic site. In some ways, it's where the Industrial Revolution really took off.
So here is the Cyfarthfa Ironworks, and you can still see 6 arches from the blast furnaces. It still looks very impressive today, but in the 19th century it would have been far, far bigger. Because the site here was really at the core of the Industrial Revolution.
And iron from here would have been transported, exported all over the world.
Yeah, that's right, to America and to the British colonies and all across Europe.
Cyfarthfa was the largest of 4 main ironworks in Merthyr, and iron was smelted in these blast furnaces 24/7. The sheer scale, the size of this place is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely enormous. And you can imagine what it would have been like working here with the blast furnaces going, lighting up the night sky for miles around.
Lots of smoke and fire, noise.
Lots of noise, yes. It must have been quite a terrifying place to work, actually, for some of the small children who worked here.
No health and safety in those days either.
No, not at all. There would have been fatalities, horrible injuries. But it's, really important to remember the significance of this place. I mean, it's such a part of our industrial heritage.
It certainly is. This place does feel neglected, even though it's got bags of potential as an historic site. Well, we're getting a bit higher now.
Yeah, it's a nice section of the Taff Trail, isn't it?
And a great view of Cyfarthfa Castle from here.
Yeah, it's lovely. You can see the luxury in which the Crauchetes would have lived compared to the workers.
I must have driven up the A470 so many times and glanced over at the Kevin Coyd Viaduct, never realising that you can actually walk or cycle over it. Up until 1966, this impressive structure carried the Brecon and Merthyr Railway, the beginning of a very scenic trip right through the heart of the Beacons to Brecon. Its design is also rather unusual. Now, one thing I've noticed, it's curved. Why is that?
Yeah, that's quite unusual for a viaduct. And Crauchet knew the engineer, so they designed it in a curved fashion to avoid Crauchet's land.
It's nice to have friends in high places.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a short distance from the viaduct, our trail threads its way through the village of Cefn Coed y Cymer. This is really the only part of the route where you're walking along a few streets, past pubs, houses and a church. And before you know it, you're out in the country.
Well, you're right, Rebecca, it really has opened out. Just look at that view.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful, isn't it?
And the amazing thing is, it's all so close to the town, right on the doorstep.
Well, that's why Merthyr is where Merthyr is, because we've got all these natural resources here that were needed to feed the ironworks. So down there would have been a limestone quarry, and you've got all the water you'd need to make the iron.
Strange to think that if it hadn't been for the natural resources that all happened to be close together here, there would have been no iron and steel industry and no Merthyr as we know it. This old railway line we're following would have played its part in carrying goods and passengers into and out of town. It was very picturesque, but owing to the number of accidents caused by the very steep gradient further up the line, the Brecon and Merthyr also became known as the Breakneck and Murder Railway.
So we're going off the rails a bit now.
Yeah, that's right. We're actually walking on the old Pont Sarn station platform. And in its day, this was a real tourist attraction with trainfuls of Sunday school parties and sightseers pulling up to this lovely beauty spot.
Well, I can see why, because we're only a couple of miles from town and you've got all this beautiful countryside.
Yeah, right in the middle of the Brecon Beacons National Park.
Can't beat it.
It's lovely.
So far, we've been following the Taff Trail, a 55-mile walking and cycle path that runs all the way from Cardiff to Brecon. But having crossed another old viaduct at Pont Sarn, we leave the easy-going tarmac surface and drop more steeply down towards the Taff Fechan River.
Just careful on the bridge, it gets quite slippery in the rain.
It's quite narrow, isn't it?
Yeah, quite tight.
A convenient footbridge leads us across the valley towards St Gwynno's Church.
Nearly at the church now.
The church was in fact built by one of the Crawshays to replace a dilapidated old 13th century Norman church. And even though the rains arrived, there's no chance of shelter because what we've come to see is in the churchyard.
Well, this is St Gwynno's Church, but it's known locally as Faenor Church, and it was built by Robert Thompson Crawshay. And round the back here, there's something quite extraordinary.
Well, I've never seen a tombstone this big before.
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? That's an enormous piece of Rada sandstone, and this is the grave of Robert Thompson Crawshay. He was the third in the line of ironmasters.
And it says on there, God forgive me. What was he asking forgiveness for?
Well, the story goes that he wasn't a very nice employer, but it's more likely to refer to the fact that he wasn't very nice to his family either. In particular, his daughter, Rose Harriet. Now, he told her she could never get married, but she disobeyed him and she did get married. And apparently he repented of it just before he died.
It's a lesson for all of us.
It is.
Placed into the wall on the other side of the church is the headstone of local parishioner Catherine Morgan, who lived to the very grand old age of 106.
That's a fantastic age to live for that era.
Yeah, it is. And she actually lived through the reign of 7 monarchs.
7 monarchs.
Bet not many of you could name all those.
Where are we going, left or right?
Just left here, and there's just a short section of road, just a few hundred yards. And just down here, we've got what is known locally as Blue Pool.
Well, it doesn't look very blue to me.
Not today.
I'll have to come back another time when the sun's shining.
Yeah.
Nice gorge, though.
Lovely, isn't it?
Well, the forecast did say it would brighten up, and I'm glad to say it was right again.
sharp turn.
Yeah.
We're now heading for the hilltop location of Morlais Castle, built by a Norman lord, Gilbert de Clare, around 1287. By that time, he'd already built Caerphilly Castle, so he knew a thing or two about castle building, but you'd never guess it from this one.
Well, what a fantastic location. It's not as impressive as Caerphilly Castle, but it does have its own golf course.
At one time, huge round towers stood at each end of this enclosure, but over hundreds of years, the castle was gradually dismantled, apart from a vaulted crypt, which amazingly survives almost completely intact. And here we are,
On top of Morlais Castle, with 360-degree panoramic views. It's amazing. We can see right down the Taff Vale there, down towards Pontypridd, and to the north, the Brecon Beacons.
It's lovely, isn't it? And just down there, you can see most of the route we've walked today.
And the A470 snaking its way down as well. What a fascinating walk, and we did indeed have a few surprises. From the world's oldest cast iron rail bridge, a rare curved viaduct, a woman who lived through the reign of 7 monarchs, and one of the largest tombstones I've ever seen, all in one wonderful walk. Shall we go?
So there we are. It's downhill all the way from here, beside the Taff Fechan River, back to Cyfarthfa Castle.